pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for October 17th, 2017, to talk about the Columbus Crew SC and the new ownership group wanting to maybe move them in Austin in 2019. The news dropped last night by Grant Wall. But to talk about it, we have on the line Patrick Murphy of The Massive Report. Was a guest a long time ago on the Two Solitudes podcast. Patrick, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me.
Sorry we're having you back for a story like this because this story gets my blood boiling. As those that listen to our other shows know, I had a team of mine move, and I'm still angry about it. I get angry every time a team moves because I think it just completely betrays the very nature of what sports is, and I think that owners need to get their head out of their ass when it comes to this. So that's my bias off the top, Patrick. I'm sure that you probably don't fall too far away when it comes to this story. Just what is your initial emotion and reaction to the suggestion that the Crew might be yanked and sent to Texas?
Yeah, it's a sad day, I think, in Columbus. Obviously, as you guys mentioned, news of this started to kind of filter out last night. Grant Wall obviously was the first to officially break any news. And then, stuff came from around here, from Texas, and then the official word from the club this morning announcing that, unless a stadium's built in a prime location, that the team will move to Texas after the 2018 season. So, yeah, it's a sad day. Obviously Columbus is an Ohio State football town, but there's a lot of passion for this team. And maybe ultimately not enough, and that has been part of the problem with attendance numbers and whatnot this season. But I think you're seeing right now what people, how much people care for this team, especially if they think it's being taken away from them.
Okay? I'm not giving it the sponsorship name today. They haven't earned that. So what is Crew Stadium? Its location? How is it that bad? I mean, I understand that the area it's not really a tourist attraction area. I've been there a couple times, but it's right by Ohio State. It's not terrible. It's only about 3 or 4 miles from downtown. It's not like it's Dallas or Chicago here. Well, what exactly is wrong with the location that demands them move that 4 miles up the road?
Yeah, it's interesting because, as you mentioned, there are plenty of MLS cities that have stadiums outside of the city. You mentioned Chicago, Dallas, Colorado, New England, that's just off the top of my head. And like you said, this is in, the city of Columbus. It's right off a freeway, major freeway. So, access to the stadium is pretty easy. Ohio State's campus is right there. And I think when they initially built it back in 1999, that was the thought, was that they'd be able to get kind of that college crowd to come down. Obviously a lot of the MLS season is during the summer, but Ohio State's a huge campus with people that stay throughout, even the summer months. So, I think part of the issue is that the stadium was built very quickly. Ohio Stadium, where the Buckeyes play football, went under renovations following the 1998 season. The Crew owners at the time, which were the Hunts, who own FC Dallas, needed to get something done rather quickly. The stadium land was rented from the Ohio Fairgrounds. That contract goes through 2023, and the stadium was put up rather quickly. So there are, potential downfalls with the actual stadium itself. There's been talk about potentially building. This was before all of this, potentially tearing down and rebuilding on the same spot. I don't know how serious those ever were, but obviously, I think the idea, or at least what they're putting out here, is that the stadium needs to be put downtown, which would be a fantastic place for it if there were room. Now, one of the big issues is, we've sat here and talked about potential downtown stadiums for a while now, and nothing's ever happened. There was a great location that the Columbus Clippers, which are the affiliate for the Cleveland Indians, used to be the Yankees affiliate. that's right across the street from the Nationwide Arena where the Blue Jackets play, that got bought up, and there's that stadium there now. There's just not a lot of room downtown to put a stadium in anywhere that would be any more convenient from where it is right now. So, in my mind, looking at this and kind of trying to read between the lines, it seems like this is not so much about getting a new stadium downtown. It's more about getting this team to Austin. I just can't see why, as I mentioned, why this is the major pitfall, given all the things we just talked about. The stadium being, while it's old and, quickly put together, being in a pretty decent location, that's worked this far, I think.
When we learned about the situation last night, too, more details started to come out, and we all went back to that promise made a few years ago by Precourt Forge Ventures, saying that we promised to keep the Columbus Crew in Columbus for at least 10 years. But apparently there was a clause, a caveat to that there's a possibility they could move to Austin. What does it say for the next season? If it's bound to happen, and the way you mention it, it's yes, the Crew is one of the first soccer-specific stadium to open in Major League Soccer, broke ground in 1998, built in 1999, and was one of the first of the MLS 1.0 type of stadium after the beginning of MLS in 1996. It's old, like you mentioned. It does need maybe a new coat of paint and upgrade technologically and broadcast up to par. But again, like you mentioned, and there's seem to be ulterior motive. As a fan, as a journalist who covers this team as well, Patrick, do you feel like it's a contract between the fans and the ownership group, technically, when you buy a ticket, that this team is our team? It's not just, you own it, you make money off of it, but this team belongs to our city, to our community. Is that promise being broken with the rumors of them moving feel like a betrayal?
Yeah, I think that is kind of the fan perspective of everything. You want to think that there's a commitment between ownership and the fans that obviously pay the money to make that sustainable. Now, on the flip side of this, it is a business. You can't deny right now that this franchise is towards the bottom in MLS in most metrics. Attendance, while was very good a year ago after the run to MLS Cup final 2 years ago, it's been down this year. This is a town that, aside from Ohio State football, you have to be a winner for fans to come out. I think even if you put a stadium downtown, you would need a good product on the field to get consistent, sellouts like you see in some other MLS markets. I think it will be very interesting to see how things go forward. Assuming they make the move to Austin, which I've never been to Austin, but I have friends who live there, is a very similar town to Columbus. Obviously, they've got Texas there. It's a huge football town, approximately the same size. There's a reason that no major professional sports teams have gone there before, I think. And so we'll see. But to answer your question, yeah, I think from a fan perspective, there is kind of this feeling of betrayal, especially with the way things have been announced. This team is in the middle of a playoff run. One more game left in the season. There's the potential that Columbus can finish as high as second in the Eastern Conference, which would mean a first-round bye in the playoffs and hosting some games, depending on how results go. So, the team is on a 9-game unbeaten run. Optimism is very high, and maybe that's the reason for doing this now, to try to take some of that momentum to get some attention. I don't know, but I think, fans here today, last night, are feeling pretty stabbed in the back by an owner who, as you mentioned, came in and said all the right things for quite a while.
The other thing that's interesting to me is, you mentioned it earlier, and it was mentioned by Charles Bowman on Twitter last night, the ground and the lease from the ground with the stadium is contracted until 2023. Now, this will leave open Precourt Sports Ventures for a breach of contract, possibly, if there is a move to Austin, which could lead to heavy fines. And there's the aspect of the new Federico Higuain contract, the new investment on the club. When you're looking at the roster over the last few years, it's been bigger than any time in its history before the investment in the actual rosters themselves, the players. So you do have those commitments, and trying to get out of them could have some potential downfall for that franchise.
Sure.
How do you see it?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Obviously, Crew Stadium was Crew Stadium for a long time until Mafre came in just 2 seasons ago, and that's a contract that, I think also you have to think about, especially if you're moving to Austin. The talk was that they would move into a temporary home while a stadium's being built. So what do you do with that sponsorship deal? Another thing I think, and it's on a little bit different note, but similar vein, how about the kids that came through the academy here? Both guys that have made the team, like a Will Trapp, Alex Cronali, Ben Swanson, these homegrown guys who, expected, I think, to play for their hometown team for, at least a good portion of their career. Now they're going to be up and moved to Austin. You mentioned Federico Higuain. Part of the reason that he, re-signed with the team is because of the community that him and his family have built here. In talking to him after the deal was announced, he was talking about how this has become home, that it's hard for people to, leave their country, especially as far away as Argentina is. But he's, from day one felt as a big a part of this community as he would have back in Argentina. Just before the deal was announced, the supporters section put up a massive tifo for him. Then they brought it out to practice to him last week, I believe. He was very moved by all of this. He's really become a part of the community. Now you're telling him he's going to have to move. And I realize this is a part of professional sports. It happens. You see teams move. We've seen it in MLS before with San Jose going to Houston. But yeah, it's kind of tough to swallow for everyone involved. How about the people that work for the team, in various forms, to ask them to up and move their lives to Austin, if that's even a possibility, is another thing to consider. So, not only the contracts that they have in place, but, there's a lot of people's lives that are going to be affected by this, which, again, it's a professional sport, it's a business, and I get that, but there's a lot of things that have to be considered when you're going to go ahead and do something like this.
It's a professional sport, it's a business, it's something that you hear quite often, but
Sure.
Sports is a different kind of gig. It involves a social contract. It involves this belief, the suspension of belief, really, an illogical belief that these people represent us, right? So when teams just up and move, it betrays that. At any rate, that's not a question. That's me ranting. But Charles Bowman had a very interesting tweet last night. This made me laugh out there. He lived in Austin about 10 years ago. He said he suspects it still has a rare combination of liberal distrust of public stadium deals and redneck disdain for soccer. That begs the question, why Austin? What the hell is better about Austin than Columbus anyway? They failed multiple times at the minor soccer level. What is the obsession with Austin in your mind?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a good question. As I mentioned, I reached out to people that I know that have lived in Austin, live in Austin, people that I know that live in that area. And it's very strange for a number of reasons. Similar in size, a little bit bigger than Columbus. As I mentioned, another big college football town. I would argue to say that it's bigger. Columbus, I know there's plenty of people here who don't pay attention as much to the Buckeyes. A lot of those people have kind of embraced the Crew as their team. From what I understand about Austin, on Saturdays in the fall, it's all about the Longhorns. And the MLS season continues to progress further and further into the fall. The postseason goes into December now, which is big time college football, territory. So I think that part of it is interesting. As you mentioned, there's been minor league teams in Austin that have failed. Now, from what I understand, and I don't know all the details behind that, but there were a lot of outside factors that had to do with that more so than just fans showing up. And I do believe that, you put a team in any sports city, it'll do well for a while. We've seen that around MLS. It's the new thing, especially if they're going to, go 2 years in a different stadium and then build a new stadium. That'll carry it for a while. But from everything I've heard, I don't know why that is the city. I mean, it's a great city. I think, someplace I'd like to visit, but in terms of a soccer town, it just doesn't seem to make a ton of sense for me, especially if you're moving from a place like Columbus, which, like we said, is pretty similar. So, it's tough to kind of piece this all together. Why this is all happening? Why now? Whatnot. We're going to talk to Anthony here in a little bit. They're having a conference call at 11 Eastern time, and we'll see what kind of answers we can get from that. But it's certainly perplexing, and I think you're asking all the right questions that everyone around here is trying to figure out.
Now, speaking of questions, what does it mean for 2018? What does it mean for 2017? Never mind 2018. The Crew have qualified for the playoffs. The Crew will have probably an away game, but we'll have at least a play-in game. What does it say for that game? What does it say for next year when this offseason the team was going to make some roster move, to make some signings, like always in offseason in Major League Soccer, renewal of season tickets? What does it say for this for next year? How do you think the fans will react to this?
It's been a mixed reaction, and you mentioned season. This announcement came just a couple days after season ticket renewal payments were due, and I'm sure that's not a coincidence. So, I've talked to friends of mine, people on social media, and I think there's a very mixed reaction right now. People aren't really sure how to approach this. Do we continue to support this team and, try and ride out a great last season, this playoff push, things like that? But on the flip side of that, we're giving our money to a guy who's about to take our team elsewhere. It's a question, I think, that you see anytime this happens and it's announced ahead of time. The Oakland Raiders are the example I've used a couple times with them moving to Las Vegas here in a couple of years. Obviously, fans have come out to support that team. But, I really don't know how it's going to be in Columbus. I think a lot of people are pretty angry right now. I think it's a good thing that the team doesn't have a home game this weekend. They're in New York City. So, I'm not sure what the reaction would be. But as of right now, I just can't see a positive in terms of, fans turning out in mass droves to try and show final support, try and get something done. I think right now, at least, people seem pretty upset and would rather, kind of give a middle finger to the higher organization as opposed to support the team and enjoy one last season. Now, that may change, especially if the team's doing well, if it makes a deep playoff run this year or, can make some noise next year. We'll see. But, I think it's very strange timing and, unfortunate for kind of everyone involved.
Yeah. This is a really early question.
Not that there's good timing for something like this.
No, they're never. Well, when they pulled my team, which was a junior hockey team from my small hometown, they announced it with 3 games to play. So it was, that maybe in some ways seems like the better way to go in a season, but at the same time, it felt like you didn't have time to mourn it either, right? So you're right. There's no good timing. This is a really early question, but so I appreciate that it's not going to be an easy answer right now. We saw with the Earthquakes when they moved to become the Dynamo back in 96, was it? 96 or 06, I mean.
Yeah.
06, yeah.
Yeah, 96. That would have been the original team. Can't move then. Anyway.
Flash.
Eventually, 2 years later in 08, the Earthquakes did come back. If something like this were to happen, could you see a groundswell in Columbus to get professional soccer back in the city at some level or back in MLS ultimately? Or do you think that this would really be something that would damage the pro club game for a long time moving forward?
Well, I think it's interesting, and part of this story that we haven't touched on yet was that Precourt had local investors that he reached out to, it sounds like, to try and get a stadium deal worked out, and they offered to buy half of the team and all of the team. Now, I don't know what the numbers were, who knows what offers were made, but he turned those down for whatever reason. And I think people have looked at that as very curious because if you're looking to move a team, why would you not listen to local investors? Now, I guess the answer to that would be if he wants to have a team in Austin, it's easier to move a team than it is to try and, get an expansion side there. But, so there is support locally for soccer, with people that have the kind of funds to potentially do something. The USL is obviously an outlet that could be possible. Obviously FC Cincinnati has made a lot of noise in that league, and is, a city that's, especially if this happens, likely to see MLS come there. So, I think that's a possibility down the line. I don't know if MLS is a realistic return, at least at this point. We saw it with San Jose. Now, I think that had a lot more to do with the stadium, more so than the attendance and revenue and things like that. So a new potential investor would have to be a little bit more cognizant of what they're getting themselves into, because like I said earlier, you have to put a product on the field in Columbus. Any sort of playing field, the Blue Jackets have seen that firsthand in order to get fans to come out. And so an expansion side would obviously have to go through some potential growing pains. I don't see, an investor like they have down in Atlanta. They can come in and splash the cash right away, but you never know. So, I don't want to rule that out. I think that there is enough passion for soccer here. The local youth soccer scene, high school soccer scene is real big. So I think that, we could see something like that. Obviously, the old expression, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Maybe that, kind of wakes up some fans who, weren't coming out to games and things like that, and kind of get some movement going. I guess we'll just kind of have to wait and see what happens here.
It would be very difficult, I'm sure, for the hardcore fans to change allegiances quickly. But could you see eventually, if the Crew were to leave and FC Cincinnati were to come in, that some Crew fans would evolve down there, especially the ones that live south of Columbus right now?
I think there could be a segment. There's become quite a lot of animosity between the Crew fans and FC Cincinnati fans, based on the social media wars on attendance and whatnot. And obviously they had the game this season in the Open Cup that FC Cincinnati won down in Cincinnati. I think a lot of, as you mentioned, diehard Crew fans would have a tough time doing that. Maybe if the circumstances were different and there hadn't been this kind of back and forth between the two sides, that would become the outlet. But right now, I think that Columbus fans would either turn to other MLS cities, just pay attention to the league, or stop following the league altogether for a while, unless there's something that we hear. Now down the line, once things have kind of settled, maybe more people would at least follow Cincinnati from afar. It's tough to say, but right now I know there's certainly a lot of animosity towards the FC Cincinnati group as a whole. But, without a team, you got to find some outlet. So maybe that's a possibility.
Boy, that's it looks bleak right now, but let's hope there's a solution found, or that maybe there's pressure behind the scenes, or the fans. And Kevin and I are going to talk about this after we say goodbye, and we're going to let you go now because we know you have a press conference you have to prepare for in a half hour. So thanks, Patrick, and hopefully we're talking 3-4 years down the line about the Crew in Columbus.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane, you know what makes me angry too is how the Columbus Crew came to existence to begin with.
Yeah.
That contest and that community, that basically because they got together and they organized and they were able to pull out like the votes necessary to be that community that was awarded a franchise in the beginning of MLS, and all that 20 years down the road just gets up and leaves. I think it sends the wrong message. I know it's just perception, but I think it sends the wrong message to the league, and the league that's looking ahead to better times and a bigger future. You still have to know where you've been. You still have to know where you come from, and that's what kind of makes me angry about the situation, is what the Crew represents in a way for Major League Soccer.
Yeah, look, it's an original team, and look, they've done this before, as people say, and you can tell that this gets my blood boiling, and it's very close to home, as I mentioned in the interview, and we don't need to rehash that again. But that's certainly one reason why it boils my blood, but it always has.
You know, I can start to talk about the Expos if you want, and I'll get really, really angry, and that's why we both are affected by this situation. Not this one precisely, but it always hits close to home when it's a professional team just getting up and leaving.
Well, exactly, and they can replace them, but it's not like with the Bulls, Belleville Bulls, OHL. They were my childhood team more than any other team. I used to go to games with my grandfather. They're very tied into like emotion for me about my childhood, right? And I'm sure that there are Crew fans out there today that have the same experience, that are in their early 20s or whatever, that went with their dad or their uncle or their grandfather or whatever, and learn to love the game and associate that with them. And it's, you know, there's all that tied in, and to just rip that from someone for a business decision is so damn cynical that it makes you crazy. But here in North America, there is this acceptance, this stupid acceptance of it, which you don't see it over there. Look at MK Dons. They moved, I don't know, it's like 16 miles or some damn thing. It's like barely any distance, but people absolutely are angry still about that. They refuse the Wimbledon fans.
To this day, MK Dons is hated throughout England, you know?
Yeah,
to this day.
FC franchise, right? Like and that was like such a small move by North America. We wouldn't even consider, they wouldn't even change their name if they made a move like that in North America. It'd be so accepted, right?
Like, just look at the history of professional sports over the last 20-something years. The Montreal Expos going to nationals. Okay, that was not the best example because they were not necessarily accepted in Washington to begin with, and they had a good team, and now, well, yeah, exactly. I don't like you. We all know that I hate the nationals. But if you're looking at the example, the Quebec Nordiques, right? They get up and leave Quebec 95, go in 1996 to Colorado. They win the league, and they have 20,000 people in the Mile House Arena. So, yeah, it is different here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, winning will solve everything. Speaking of which, there's some rumors that the Carolina Hurricanes might move up to Quebec, that might be the team that moves. And apparently I've listened to a lot of hockey stuff lately because I've been watching more hockey, that if they move, it would be in about 2 years. And in about 2 years, everyone in hockey world expects the Carolina to be a Stanley Cup contender. So I think it would be only fair, and I know you won't agree because you don't like Quebec City, but it would be only fair for the Nordiques to have a team move up there if they had to move and have them win this cup the next year, because that's exactly what happened to them, which is actually maybe the biggest burn of all, right? Like, they had this great team that could never get over the hump, then they moved to Colorado and win. Of course, they probably wouldn't have got Patrick Roy. We're going way off topic at this point.
Well, they would have never got Patrick Roy if they would have stayed in Quebec City. But Columbus, like, that's another situation. We asked Patrick, you know, does Higuain really want to go to Texas? Maybe he's happy in Columbus. Maybe he's happy in this community and doesn't want to move away. And there's other situations like this. Maybe, what does it say for MLS in San Antonio that actually went through all the troubles of preparing the bid, of partnership with, well, Spurs are owning it, but the entire building of that base, grassroots base for a new franchise in San Antonio. This just goes, you know where. If there's an Austin team, they're not going to be a fourth team in Texas. So, you know, there's a lot of ramification possible to this, and one of them could be MLS in San Antonio just dying before it even exists.
Yeah, it's another area that angers me a lot. If you read the press release, let me bring it up here real quick to read MLS's portion of this press release. It's like they're compliant to this, is what come down to. Complacent, I meant to say, with the complicit. Let's try a third attempt at that word, Duane. They're complicit with this, so that kind of irritates me a little bit. And when they came into the league, as you mentioned in question to Patrick, he made the promise. It was like, you know, an empty promise ultimately. Oh, I'm going to try my best to keep it in Columbus. Well, we've heard that before. We've heard that with the Expos, with Laurie back in the day for years. Oh, yeah, no, I'm committed to this. No, he wasn't. He was always looking for an out. He was just had to go through the motions of going through the stadium deal.
He did it in Florida, too. Moved from where they were to
or
Miami.
Worse attendance than, yeah.
Exactly. Now they're exactly. And so no, it's what does it say about owners? I don't know. Maybe it makes us appreciate the other owners we have. I don't know. I feel terrible for the Columbus Crew fans. Yeah, the cynicals will be like, "Oh, it's their fault. They should have gone to the stadium more often. They should have filled those stands. They should have supported the team better." Have you seen the Crew over the last decade? I don't blame them for not coming back to the stadium. When the most memorable moment of the last decade is when your scoreboard lit on fire and someone played a Billy Joel song in the background. Yeah, of course you're going to not necessarily buy a season tickets. But come on, I feel terrible.
Well, they did make an MLS Cup final, in fairness to them, but
True.
it didn't go well for them that day.
True, but you know what I mean, right? So, yeah, it's I miss the days of Barbasol, though. Like that was probably the most.
That girl that gave the finger to the camera at the end of the stadium. I'm sure she's doing worse right now. Whoever she is, if she's out there, please call in. I'd love to have a chat with you. I want to have. That was the season that was bookended by female fans giving the finger because the Vancouver fan. That was kind of funny. Anyway,
Vancouver, yeah. But yeah, no, that's interesting.
Let me read Don Garber's statement in the press release, and then we'll talk a bit more about this, I guess. It's quote unquote, as attendance league-wide continues to grow on record-setting pace and markets across the country seek to join MLS, country again, singular, Don, get your plurals right. Columbus's situation is particularly concerning, said MLS Commissioner Don Garber. Despite PSV's significant investment and improvements on and off the field, Columbus Crew SC is near the bottom of the league in all business metrics, and the club's stadium is no longer competitive with other venues across MLS. The league is very reluctant to allow teams to relocate, but based on those factors, we support PSV's efforts to explore options outside of Columbus, including Austin, provided they find a suitable stadium location. Don Garber, stick that up your ass. That is so business-centric. That is so bullshit that I want to go out and strangle him when I hear that.
Don't say those things, Duane. But you know, what I really just hit me when you were talking is there's two things in business. Okay, imagine we're a front office of a league or a commissioner or something. You have struggling teams. There's kind of two ways to look at it. Do you cut your losses and bring somebody new? i.e. you move the team, fold that team like a Chivas and start a new one then somewhere else? Or do you do everything in your power, everything possible to help them? I don't know. It's one or the other. And because it's like chairman of boards and board meetings, it's easier to go with the positive and the faster growth of a new team than it is to actually help a team in trouble to regain their footprints and grassroots importance in their own market. That's almost more difficult. When you alienate a fan base, it's kind of tough to get them back. It's even tougher to get them back than to get new fans. Hey, we're all fall into the same boat of, a new logo, new colors, I like it. Yeah, it's more difficult to take a brand that's been suffering over the last decade or so and put them back to relevant situation.
They're about to get $600 million in expansion fees over the next 4 years. $600 million. The dude that owns them is a billionaire. They can afford to build their own stadium. They're looking for a handout. They're looking for an excuse. This irritates me so much. We saw a similar thing in this country last night, actually, came to front on the hockey side of things in Calgary with the re-election of a very popular mayor out there. And then you had members of the Flames organization tweeting about how this was worse than, quote unquote, worse than Trump being president, because the guy that wasn't supporting their free handout stadium deal, rink deal in that case, got reelected, so that they're going to have to, fund their own stadium deal. I don't understand why the richer you get, the more handouts you get. That doesn't make any bloody sense to me. Maybe that's my liberal coming out. I don't know. But at the same time, come on, guys. $600 million in expansion fees. Can you not, if Columbus is really crying poor here, can you not throw them $50 million of that $600 million, because you are a single entity league, to refurbish Crew Stadium, which isn't that, it's not in a bad location. I mean, it's not a pretty location around it, but there's a lot of space around it. It's in the Ohio State Fairgrounds. You could tailgate. They have a bit of a culture there with that. The stadium's bare bones. I could see them wanting to update that a little bit to put some proper seats in there and things like that. But by and large, the location, come on, man. You're going to move it 4 miles up the road? That's not going to make a major difference.
And it's
Columbus. Fine where it is.
What do you expect? You're not going to be like Rocky Mountains in the background. You're not next to the beach. What do you want? How do you want to make this look more pretty anyways? You gotta play the hand you dealt sometimes. And, you're in Columbus, so deal with it.
Downtown Columbus is nice. people sort of like to make fun of it that have only been around the stadium, because let's be honest here. The area around the stadium it's very cliche American big city, because you're surrounded by highways. It's kind of low market. You got the university around the corner, which is sort of a juxtaposition, because when you go around, Ohio State has money coming out. Like if you turn onto that Ohio State campus, and it's gorgeous. Like everything about that is first rate. But then you go a couple blocks down the line, and again, this is an area that's sort of around highways and not really in the middle, and kind of in like an in-between zone, right? Like it's not downtown, it's not in Ohio State, it's just kind of there. My greatest memory of it is sort of walking to a gas station to buy beer. So that was my experience in Columbus. But nonetheless, it's fine location wise, because it's easy to get to, and because it's in a city that already has a tailgating kind of culture, having that space around it's kind of nice. And the area immediately around the stadium, you've got your parking lots. There's some little grassy areas there that you can picnic or drink or whatever, and it's fine. It's perfectly fine as a stadium. You just need to sort of throw 30-40 million into that inside of it. Maybe play a season Ohio State would have a temporary stadium. I'm sure that you could probably make some kind of arrangements with that you could play a season with while you renovated it. You could do a BMO. You could have 3 months on the road. Sucks, but you get it done over a couple years, and your stadium suddenly seems like a new stadium. And BMO Field really does seem like a new stadium now than it did 4 or 5 years ago, right? There's options there if they really want them. But I think that this guy just wanted to go to Austin forever. And that's finished with that, Kevin, unless you have any final thoughts on the stadium location.
No, outside of
Austin.
Yeah, why Austin? Okay, we haven't said that. Well, let's finish the show there. Austin would be the smallest market, and by quite a margin, in Major League Soccer, if there's a team moving there. We've seen the Aztecs, and we've seen there's a certain soccer culture in Austin, yes. But bigger and better than a Columbus? Is the potential really bigger and better? Those are questions that right now my answers would be no.
Well, I read Charles's tweet out there, and I think that it kind of nails it on the head. Austin does have, everyone understands, and South by Southwest is there. It has some artsy kind of culture around it. I think, it's the Portland of Texas.
I was going to say it. I was going to say it's the Portland of Texas.
But it's still in Texas. And there still is an element of, the rest of that city, just like in Portland, it isn't all Portlandia, right? Like there are people in Portland that are just kind of normal Northwest living folk that don't kind of live that liberal, crazy juggling on unicorns sort of lifestyle.
Yeah, there's a lot of government workers in Texas.
I would give a loony to someone who was juggling on a unicorn, by the way, if they were busking with that. But anyway.
That would be 0 loonies that you would be giving out. But
exactly.
If you go to Austin, Duane, there's a lot of government worker in Austin as well. That's where the capital is, in Austin, Texas. And you have a lot of government workers living in the area of Austin. And that, in a way, is not like your quote-unquote target market for Major League Soccer fans, right? The ultimate market where people believe that there's a lot of money is the famous male 18 to 35, because they have a lot of disposable income, especially nowadays with men having kids closer to their 30s and mid 30s than early 20s. So they have more disposable income and are more prone to become fans and have season tickets of a team like this. But still, that market, that target, it's a small amount of what the Austin population is. And I still feel Austin a very, very small market. And if you want to go through the expansion route, fine. But it's taking the team away from one community to bring it to a smaller and not necessarily bigger potential community, money-wise or growth-wise or branding, quote-unquote, wise. So I still feel it doesn't make sense.
No, I don't think it makes sense at all in my mind. Hold on, I'm trying to get directions to how far it is from Houston exactly, because that's the other part of this. Is like anyone who, I guess, is closer to San Antonio. Really, my geography, Texas knowledge isn't as strong as it would be. It looks like it's about what, an hour from Houston, an hour and a half from Houston.
I think it's way further than that. Texas is big. Like Texas is.
Okay, fair enough. So there wouldn't be a ton of Dynamo fans, is what we're saying, that would drive down. Maybe one or two, but not a lot. All right, fair enough. But look, I just don't like this. And is this a ploy to get something done in Columbus? This is what really kind of irritates me more about this than anything else. I'm used to threats by this point, and as much as I don't like them, I still accept that they're part of it. I talked about the Calgary Flames a minute ago. As much as the Flames are going to, throw their toys out of the pram and, pound their feet on the ground and have a temper tantrum, they're not going to move the goddamn Calgary Flames from Calgary, because where the hell are they going to put them? It's going to be better off for them, right? Like, that's not going to happen. This, however, seems a little different. They seem like this is just, fait accompli, that they're going to move them, and they're just going through the motions now of making it look like they're trying. So my message to end the show, Kevin, is this: is if you're a Columbus fan, obviously, then you have to make your choice. You have to make your noise. You can make your noise by not going, but I think that might be counterproductive to the cause. If you really want to keep the team there, I think you need to make your noise by going, being in the seats, maybe wearing, I was going to say wearing black, but that kind of matches their colors. So maybe wear pink or something that stands out, something in the crowd that's T-shirts that really stick out, like "Screw you, P-Court," "Crew belong in Columbus," things like that, whatever. I would do something like that and make yourself visible in the stadium. And I would actually encourage other supporters groups that listen to this outside around, put the rivalry aside for a second, and tifos, banners, whatever, support messages to the league to say that we don't support the idea of teams moving. As much as we will be rivals on the field, even rivals on Twitter, we don't subscribe to this. We're not going to support this. We're not okay with this, that this is going to be something that we're going to fight against. If you believe in, if you're defending MLS, which we do, and we defend MLS structure to a point, and people will say, I'm sure there's someone listening to this that looks at how I do defend MLS from time to time and talks, and I'm okay with single entity to a point. I'm not really okay with single entity in its entirety, but there's a nuance to that a lot of people don't get. At any rate, they might think that there's a contradiction here. There's not. I can still understand the need for certain, financial controls and financial supports in a system, while at the same time believing that these clubs should aspire to be clubs and aspire to represent their communities, and that we shouldn't just be moving them around like they're McDonald's franchise, because that kind of betrays everything, Kevin. So if you're a fan of another club out there that agrees with me, I encourage you to do whatever you can to try and make your message clear that this is not something you're okay with. And that's my final statement on the day, Kevin.
2 hours and a half of driving, apparently, between Austin and Houston, and Austin and San Antonio, about an hour and a half, depending on traffic as well. So Austin is located north of Houston, and San Antonio northwest of Houston, northeast of San Antonio. I still think it would be a tough situation. And yes, it does take the wind out of the sails of MLS in San Antonio, which does have a pretty decent bid for an MLS franchise in the upcoming round of expansion, which we'll know more in December this year, and eventually 2 more will be announced. And MLS in San Antonio was a bid that I thought had a lot of chances because of the ownership group, how the Spurs in the NBA have been managed financially over the last 10 to 15 years. It's a success story on and off the court, and they would have been able to bring this mentality to an MLS franchise. So this would totally kill whatever MLS in San Antonio had in plans. And that's another ramification of this that I think we'll be able to keep an eye down the road, is how this move by Anthony Precourt and Precourt Sports Ventures can actually affect a lot of other people, communities, and teams in the league.
Yeah, just don't, MLS. All right, Kevin, as always, say goodbye.
You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. Stay tuned tomorrow, 10 a.m. for another edition of Soccer Today. And as always, until then, support your club and hopefully have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.